Okay, so we're back in the workshop. Today we're going to do a video showing you how to fit a set of aftermarket handlebars. We've gone with the Protaper handlebars. They seem to be pretty common amongst the Grom crew, bit more of a BMX feel to the bike. Before we start pulling everything off, let's talk about what we're actually going to have to do then. Okay, so just as an overall overview of what we've got to do. Starting over here, this little bar end weight, that'll have to be removed. This Honda standard grip, again, that will have to be removed off the end of the handlebar. It doesn't turn, it's not a rotator, is it? So it might be stuck on with glue, so we'll have to break the seal and then pull it off. We've got the little instrument cluster here, so that'll have a couple of bolts underneath that will have to be loosened. And then we've got these two bolts here that hold on the mirror stalk and also the clutch. Careful, behind this piece of plastic there's the clutch safety cutout switch, so you can start it in gear. Okay, in the centre we've got these 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're little plastic caps, we'll pop them off. Underneath there we'll have some Allen key bolts. When we loosen those and everything else has been taken off the handlebars will actually come loose. And then over on this side we've got our instrument cluster again, kill switch and starter. There'll be a couple of screws underneath there that are going to hold that into place. We've also got the throttle body, the housing of the throttle body, so where the 2 cables come up from the carb and also your throttle. The throttle usually pulls off quite easily. It is rotating freely around the handlebar, but we will have to remove the bar end weight as well. So let's take our time and work through it systematically. Okay, step 1, the mirrors have got to go, so let's get them removed. Usually it's just a nice, simple, easy job. You can do it with a spanner, you can usually do it with a little bit of force as well. So we're just going to try and rotate them backwards. It should be an anti-clockwise spin. Okay, I'm a massive, big fat liar. It's actually an anti-clockwise spin, so once it moves, let's take them out. Off it comes. Keep it somewhere safe. Don't keep it on top of something that's going to fall off. Leave that one there. And the next one. Mirrors are now off. Next, we're going to work on the easier of the 2 sides. So we're going to go for throttle first. Don't be too worried about the next step. Just take your time. We're going to do it slowly, so you can do it with me. First things first, the bar ends have got to come off. So we need a nice big screwdriver. Okay, so again, we talked about me loving these T-bars. I'm not going to snap anything or round any heads off if I'm using a T-bar, because I can only use my own strength. So I've got a nice T-bar, and I've put a screwdriver head onto the T-bar. Once it's snapped, it should just unscrew nicely. Okay, so unscrewed, little bar weight comes off with the bolt. I'll take it over and we'll keep that in a separate pot. You know where it is. Okay, next the front brake assembly. Let's take the front brake assembly off. These 2 bolts here, they should be an 8mm. A little bit tight, so again, I'm going to use my T-bar so I can put a little bit of extra weight on them. And then once they're loosened, we can just nicely remove those. Okay, so the back plate's off, those 2 8mm bolts undone. So I'm going to take these over here for a second, put them into a tub. Keep the tub handy. Now we've loosened the brake assembly, it's still attached via the brake light switch, which is this little switch here. Let's have a focus. Right, so those 2 little rubber wires that clip on for your brake switch, just take them off, undo them, and then that should free up the whole front brake unit. The front brake unit should just be able to pull through, and we'll rest it on the front here. Okay, just resting that on the front out of the way. I'm going to go back to my bracket, and I'm going to reattach the bracket here so nothing goes missing. Not going to lose it. So pop them on there like that. Alright. So, bracket's back on, front brake's removed, just resting on the front there. Make sure if it is going to be resting on your plastics, you don't want to damage your plastics, just get an old cloth or something. a nice cloth over it like that, and then it can just rest against the cloth so you're not hurting your lovely Grom. Right, next, throttle housing. Throttle housing underneath, there'll be a couple of screws, usually two, one there and one here on the front. I'm going to undo those two screws. That should loosen it up, and then we'll be able to pull the throttle housing off. Once the throttle housing is off, I'm hoping that this throttle tube will just slide off. Okay, so I've taken the two screws out of the throttle housing, and it's now started to come apart of its own free will. So both these screws have little washers on them. You know my trick, get your plastic tub and keep them safe and separate. Alright, so throttle body housing is in the two pieces that it comes in now. So I'm going to take this piece, which strangely enough, oh not that strange, is cable tied on with a Honda cable tie to the handlebar. So we've got to get rid of that cable tie. Just a simple case of pushing in the little bit of plastic in there that's holding it in place, and then removing that, and then we'll pull this out of the way so it's not going to get in the way while we take off the actual throttle. Woohoo! Cable tie off. I'm going to take this part, I'm just going to get it out of the way again. Just bring it down out the way so it's not on us while we're working on it. Next job, these are the two throttle cables, push me, pull me. Let's have a little focus, there we go. So I need to remove both of these from the housing. So I'm going to get a little pair of needle nose pliers, pinch the wire, I'm just going to lift them out from each side. Okay, so I've removed the cable. I had to pull the cable forwards to get it out of its little housing here. Once that cable's removed, we've got to remember this is the top cable. So what I like to do is I'm going to pinch it and I'm going to put a little piece of tape around it and write top on it, okay? Ta-da, the magic of movie land. Right, so with this on out the way, if I just pull this gently, the throttle body should pull away, and then my lovely throttle simply needs rotating, and we'll drop the bottom wire out like that, and that's it. So that's your throttle body completely off. We'll move that out the way too. And I mean, if you really wanted to, you could put bottom on this one, but if that's the top, there's only two, the other one's always going to be the bottom. And then your throttle tube's off, so your throttle tube can go over here and live with your other parts. It's always good to keep some sort of organisation when you're doing it. And now we've got to do the other side. So the other side will be slightly harder because this is glued into place. Right, so we're starting on the left side now. Bow weight's got to come out. Now, this is really in tight. I've tried with a normal screwdriver. It's not going to work. So we're going to use this tool. It's called an impact driver, okay? It's essentially a torque wrench, but it only turns on impact. So if you're going to screw or unscrew this, you get these toughened bits that go in the end. Imagine that sitting in there. Instead of just twisting and then naturally, let's see if we can get focused. Naturally, as I twist, it works its way out if it's too tight. Instead, I'm going to impact, I'm going to drive it in and then turn it at the same time. So it's going to go in and turn. To do that, it uses this big seat, and what happens is you just hit that end with a hammer, and as it goes in, it turns. Now I'm going to show you the same way as my mentor showed me. If you can see the end of the impact drive, let's get to the side where you can see it. As we push down, it turns. I'll show you again. It's only a slight turn, but it's enough to break the bolt loose from its binding. So we're going to try this now, impact driver. Let's have a go. Impact driver in the end of there, like that. Hit this end closest to me with a lump hammer or a rubber mallet, something like that, and that should loosen off the bolt. Right, so impact driver's in. If I hit that end with my mallet, bang, it pushes the screwdriver in and twists. So I've already done it, I've hit it a couple of times, and sure enough, it always works. So that's the bar weight coming out. I'll probably do it with my hand now. If you remember, we've got another bar weight on the other side. So I'm going to put these in the same pot together so we don't lose them. Never ending thread. Right, we've got the other one. So that's two matching bar end weights, there's the other one, so in the pot with that. Right, next let's get the clutch off. So I'm not going to touch this bolt, I'm going to do these two instead. Okay, so I've undone these two bolts, I've taken it off the handlebar and I've put it back on. I've just tightened them up with my fingers so you're not going to lose anything. Next, it's the wires that go with it. So the clutch has a safety switch, that way if you stall it in gear, rather than have to put it back into neutral and turn the engine off and on again, you can just pull the clutch in. So behind this rubber mount hosing, I'll just have to use 2 fingers to do this. So behind this rubber mount hosing, I've just moved that rubber. We've got just 2 little blade connectors. There'll be a male and a female, and the theory is when you put your clutch in, they form a circuit and that'll let the electric start. Okay, so we're going to take these 2 wires off now. Just pulling them, literally just pulling them off. Yeah, pulling them off away. Okay then, wires off. This whole clutch thing, this whole clutch assembly will just fall away from the handlebars. So all we've got left on the handlebars in total is the left grip and the left inch. Right then, 2 screws from the left cluster out. This should now open up like a clamshell. And we should be able to have a little look inside. It's actually still a bit on the tight side, so pull that one down, lift that one up, and that should loosen off. I'm just going to use both hands and open that. Right, so the reason it was tough is where the turn signal is, there's a little plastic bezel behind and it's got a little split in it, so this piece has to be pushed up away from the bezel. So we've got to lift it up away from the turn switch before it'll come loose. Okay, so just have a little fiddle. See, and then once that's up and out, you can take your instrument cluster off. And that's it, look, all we've got is the handlebars now. So this grip is going to be an absolute bastard to get off. So what we're going to do is, we're going to undo these 4 bolts. So these are little plastic caps. I'm going to nip them out now, and then we'll undo the bolts and we'll take it off. And then the big reveal on how to get this off. Okay, so these little caps, you can see there's a tiny little gap around the outside for you to get in with something underneath. I'm using a seal puller. So it's like a little toothpick but made out of metal. Alternatively, a really thin screwdriver or a Stanley knife. What I don't want to do is damage the metal around the outside because then it'll look rubbish. So take your time, not too much force, and they should just come out like that. Ta-da! So I need a tub. I'm gonna go 1. Okay, now as you can see, doing it one-handed, not so good. I managed to get 1 out. I'm going to take the other 3 out now, but I'm going to do it with 2 hands. Right, 4 little caps, they're going to go to one side. I keep all my tools that I'm using just handy so that I can go back to them if I need them. Right, next, we're going to need to undo these bolts. Now, if you've got Allen keys, use traditional Allen keys. I like to use the socket Allen keys, so like this kind of thing, and you've got all different sizes and they go on your T-bar or your socket wrench. So let's find the right one and get that done. Right, so on the Grom, this is a 6mm Allen key on a T-bar. So we need to loosen them off. Obviously the whole thing's going to rotate because I'm turning the Allen key that way. And we need, again, might need 2 hands for this one, might not. So a little twist. No, there you go. That's 1. I'm not going to undo them all, I'm just going to loosen them all to kind of make life a bit easier. So there's the second one. 3rd one's cracked. And then the 4th one. Bingo. Right, now all I'm going to do is screw the rest of them out, put them in a nice tub so they're all organised, and come back to you. So I've got 3 of them out, and the retention piece. I'm just going to take the last one out now, and then the handlebars will be clear, so I don't want them to fall over anywhere or scratch any of my paint. So I'm just going to back them out slowly, and then do it with my fingers like that. I'm just resting it on my hip. Right, last screw, retention bracket, and that's it, handlebars off. So, sometimes you might find that that little bit of metal sticks on there, so it just wants a little tap. Right, so all 4 bolts are out, and the 2 mounting points. I'm going to put them over there with all of our other bolts all nicely organised so they're not going to get mixed up. And now I'm going to get a bucket of hot water. Okay, so very hot water. If I have to tell you that hot water burns, stop watching this video and watch SpongeBob SquarePants. Get your handlebar with a rubber grip on, and literally I'm just going to sit it in the hot water. It needs to be enough that the rubber grip is completely submerged. What's going to happen is the heat is going to make whatever glue they've used relax a little bit, and also it's going to make that rubber malleable or manipulatable, so that when we pull it and twist it, we're not going to damage it, and it should come off in one nice easy move. Fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. Now back to cup of tea while we wait. Right, while the grip is soaking, I've put the Protaper bars on and very loosely put the bolts in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and straighten the wheel. I'm just going to try and work out where the middle is. So you've got to make sure that it sits absolutely bob on in the middle. So you want about the same distance from each side. Pretty good, looks pretty good to me. When you're happy, you can tighten the bolts, but not all the way, just enough so that we can manipulate them, but it's not going to move out, okay? So tighten, tighten, tighten. And so on and so forth. Okay, so the handlebar's been soaking in the hot water for a while now, so I'm going to wrap the handle with cloth. And I'm going to manipulate it left and right, giving it a really tight squeeze left and a really tight squeeze right. And I'm going to try and break that glue, and hopefully it should slide off eventually. This might take a little bit of time. Don't rush. Pop it back in the water. Give it another 10 minutes if it won't work. Yeah, try not to be too forceful until you have to be, until you've tried everything else. Right, so it's starting to come now. So I'm just rotating and pulling. Rotating and pulling. Until eventually it's going to come off. Again, 2 hands is good, but you can see it's already started to come off. Woohoo! So it comes off. You can see the leftover glue. So that hot water, all it's done is it's just kind of warmed the glue back up again, made it a bit more malleable, and it's also made the rubber nice and soft and squishy. Yeah. And then when the time comes to refit, I'm going to put it back in the water before I slide it onto the new handlebar. Okay. So it goes back in the water just to keep it that nice and squishy, and we're also going to apply some new glue because it needs a bit of glue. Okay, you see you've got this nice rough surface here for it to bond to as well. You've got a nice rough surface for the new grip to bond to. Okay, and that's it. Then your old handlebars, they can go somewhere safe if you want to put it back to new. Just make sure you write which bike they're on. Okay, so handlebars off. On the underside of each handlebar, you'll see there's a drill hole. You see, there's one there, and there's one on the other side. So there. Right. We need to measure how far from the end of the bar they are, and then drill the same holes on these bars, because when we put these electronic components back together, the clusters, these bits here, they're supposed to seat in the holes that are underneath the bars. So if you look from the side, you'll see it's got a raised profile, and that's going to go in it like a lock, like a key into a lock, and that's going to stop this from moving up and down the handlebar. So we're going to have to drill the bars for the new hole. Now drilling them is not too big of a problem usually, just make sure you drill them in the right place. I'll show you some top tips before you get your drill out. Right, so handlebar, original at the top, Protaper ones at the bottom. these holes that are drilled into the original bars need to be drilled into our Protaper bars, so that when we put the cluster back on there, the locating dowel goes in. So we're going to have to drill some holes. So first things first, they've got to be the same distance from the end of the bar, so that everything goes back on in the same shape. Alright, so measure the distance on this Grom from the very edge to the very left edge of the hole. So this bottom bit of the hole here is 16 centimeters. So I'm going to measure 16 centimeters, then put a dot to the outside edge on these bars. I'm going to use that nice red paint that I use from time to time. Just makes it nice and easy for things like marking and drilling. Okay, so 16 centimeters is there. I'm going to go that far away from the edge. So 16 centimeters on that top bit there. Red dots. And then the same on the other side. We've gone 16 centimeters from the very edge. So 16, and then we've got the little red dots. We need to make sure they're going at the right angle as well. You can see the holes on these are kind of forward facing slightly, so with the bars completely upright, they're not in the bottom, they're in kind of like a funny angle. So instead of drilling straight up, I'm going to instead of drilling straight up, I'm going to drill in at a slight angle like that. Okay, so you could kind of do one of these. It's called a centre punch. It's just a hard piece of metal with a point on it, and then I've just got a normal hammer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line this centre punch up with the very middle of that dot, and I'm going to give it a crack with a hammer, and it's going to leave a little dot like that. Let's have a little focus. There you go. And then that's going to help me seat the drill bit, and the drill bit is going to be able to chew into that little dot, so we get a nice good hole ready for the new equipment being fitted. Okay, so I've centre punched both dots, one there and the other one there, and now I'm going to slowly but surely drill two nice holes to receive the equipment cluster. Okay, so what I've done is I have drilled a hole 16 centimeters from the bottom lip of the hole to the end on both sides. And it's not a hole straight up, it's not going straight in from the bottom to the top, it's coming in at an angle from the front, just like on the original bars. And now we're going to refit everything one step at a time, working our way until it's fully rebuilt. Okay. Right, so handlebar, rubber grip, soaked in boiling water, back on the handlebar. Make sure it goes nicely to the tip, because on these Protaper bars, we're not going to put the bar end weight in, we're just going to leave it flush like that. Underneath here, I've got my hole drilled ready to receive the electronic cluster. So we just basically take the screws out like we did before. We close it in around the handlebar and tighten it up, making sure that that lug, that recessed silver lug that you can see, goes into the hole that you've drilled. So it's nice and steady. And then finally, pop this back on this side. Pop your clutch lever back on the side. So we're just going to pop it on there, ready to go, and then make sure that your clutch switch, the safety switch, these two blades, get these two plastic pins back on them. Okay, so we're going to rebuild the left side now. Just take your time. You took it apart earlier. All your screws should be in little compartments ready to go. Do it one step at a time. Start with your instrument cluster, because that's going to go right next to your rubber, and then your clutch on the end, on the end edge of that, and then that's your left side rebuilt. Okay, so instrument cluster back on, the little dowel in the hole you've drilled. I've put the clutch assembly back on. Tighten these up. They don't have to be mega tight yet, because there's going to be a little bit of adjustability you're going to need. This wiring that goes to the instrument cluster is now a little bit on the stretch side, so what I'll do is I'll take this plastic off. I'll have a look if I can free up any more excess, so that when I'm turning left and right, I'm not going to damage the wiring. And then finally, this is the important bit, your clutch safety switch here. Make sure your little pins just go back onto the appropriate blades. So one on there, one on there. Let's have a look. There we go. Two. And then reseat that bit of protective rubber on there to keep it from getting water in it. Okay, so it's all back in together. Your clutch safety switch is back on, and we know it's working, so that's brilliant. Make sure everything works. So horn, turn signals left and right. The high beam, we'll have to check that when the engine's running a little bit later on, but that's that left side done. It wants its mirror putting back on, and we just want a little bit of slack to help with that. So throttle assembly, you need your throttle tube back now. What we're going to do is we're going to seat that little pin there under my thumb. You can see it's a raised edge. That's got a seat in the hole that we drilled before. So there's the hole that we drilled. So we've got to seat those two together, and that'll click in when it's happy, like that. So it makes a good lock in place. Then we just need to attach the top and the bottom cables to the appropriate top and bottom holes on your throttle. So do the bottom one first and then attach the top one. You might need a pair of pliers to do it. Right, so throttle is back on, and all of my equipment panels, they're all attached. They just want tightening up so they're nice and tight. Next we've got to put on the front brake and the front brake switch, so don't forget, like the other side. That was the fiddliest throttle I've done in a long time, so yeah, bit of a pain in the arse. Also, on the clutch side, we talked before about 16 centimeters from the bar end to the back lip of the hole. On this side, on the throttle side, it's 14 centimeters, so I have had to drill another hole 2 centimeters close to the end. So throttle side 14, clutch side 16. Always measure yourself, just so that you can be certain you're not going to make a cock up. All right. Right, so brake lever back on. Tighten this so that it holds it in place. Then you're going to have to sit on the bike, and you're going to have to make sure that you've not trapped any wires. So what I did is I undid the 4 screws, 1, 2, and then same on the other side, 3, 4. The plastics tilt forwards, and then I've just loosened up a little bit of slack for the clutch and the throttle and the electrical cables, because we don't want them to pull. A really good way of checking that you've got it right is to start the bike and then turn the steering left and right with the engine running. If the engine races when you turn one way or the other, you've not got enough slack in your throttle cable. So we'll just do that now. We'll just check that it's working okay. So we're going to switch all the way to the left, all the way to the right. If there's any notchiness, or it feels like anything's catching, you need to take a second, work out what it is, and fix it. All it takes usually is a little tug on one of the cables, and you can see they've all got plenty of slack, so we've got loads of space. Absolutely perfect for us. Over here, the clutch should be nice and springy, adjusted properly. And then just check everything works. Now you've finished messing around with everything. Right, and the final thing is, put your mirrors back on. When your mirrors are back on, sit on the bike. Make sure that the front brake feels like it's in the right place. Remember, loosen these bolts. You can rotate it down or up to personal taste. Make sure on this side, your clutch is in the right place. If you feel like it needs tilting forwards or back, again, it's personal choice. And then finally, let's put the mirrors back on. Okay, so get your mirror in position. Screw it down as far as you want. Get your nut, the top nut, in a position where you can back it down by going clockwise, anti-clockwise down. Hold your mirror in place, and we're just going to rotate that down to meet the nut below it, so they're pinching against each other, and that should set your mirror position. And then slide your little rubber cover down over it, and then you can adjust your mirror however you want, so you can see where you're going when people are coming behind you. Perfect. And then, if you haven't already done it, tighten these. Once this is fitted, once this Protaper bar is fitted, it does make it a bit difficult to do the bolts at the back. So I did those ones first, and then did the ones at the front, and really tighten them quite tight to hold it in place. The last thing you want to do is do a little jump off a curb or a little wheelie, and then the handlebars to push forward suddenly, or push back forwards. All of a sudden, you're looking at the front tyre. You need to be certain that they can't move. So when you've tightened them, give them a little rotation, try and move them. If they move, you've not tightened them enough, give them another squeeze. Okay, so we've done the sprocket mod, and we have done the Protaper handlebars. Protaper handlebars took a bit longer than I thought they would. Just take your time with it, don't rush. Measure twice, cut once, or should I say measure twice, throw once. It's about 16 centimeters away, the locating hole on the clutch side is about 14 centimeters on the throttle side. Just take your time when measuring them. I missed out there, and I've now got an extra hole in there, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over an extra hole in a handlebar. Yeah, if you enjoyed it, let us know in the comments. Like, share and subscribe. Awesome.